Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. You know, if Jesus thought it was hard talking about not coveting your neighbor's stuff or committing adultery, he was in for a surprise when he got to this. Trying to convince people to love their enemies and turn the other cheek and all of that stuff was where the rubber really met the road for his ministry. And not coincidentally, it was really one of the most important things that he had come to tell us. One of the greatest lessons that he came to teach us. Because for human beings, most of us at least, there's really nothing quite as satisfying as righteous indignation in the face of mistreatment. There is no feeling quite like that feeling you've got when you come out on top in a dispute with somebody that you really don't like. You just seem to be wired that way. I can hold a pretty good grudge. I've talked about that before. It's one of my superpowers. But it's not really something I'm proud of. Here's something. I once nuked a city because I was mad at somebody. Not literally, mind you, as far as you know. But in a novel that I wrote many years ago, it's an unpublished one, I exploded a nuclear weapon over the city of Corpus Christi for no other reason than I was angry at somebody who lived there. And at the time, it gave me a certain amount of satisfaction. It was probably an unhealthy amount of satisfaction to imagine this person being incinerated in the thermonuclear fireball. And that was the only reason I did it, because otherwise it made no sense. Because from a strategic standpoint, Corpus Christi is about as militarily important as Dubuque. But this person lived there, so it had to be done. At that time in my life, which was many years ago, I was not interested, really, particularly, in following the teachings of Jesus on this particular matter. So I let myself get angry about stuff and stay angry about things. I like to think I've gotten a little bit better. And here's the thing, it's tempting to take the high road, the intellectual road, I should say, and to say, well, actually there are various interpretations of what Jesus said here, and you have to take into account the differences in language and culture, and all of that is really just kind of, blah, blah, blah. Because if you want to be honest, it's really not complicated. Not in theory, anyway. Because for better or worse, Jesus here is not speaking in parables that have to be dissected for their meaning. Instead, he is speaking in fairly short, declarative sentences. Kinds of sentences English teachers love. And I assume he did that because he didn't want his followers to have to go back and parse them later for meaning. What does he say? Love your enemies. Don't just love your enemies, do good to your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If somebody strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. We'll stop there for a minute. This is one of those places where we sometimes try to take a simple declarative sentence or phrase and get some different meaning out of it. And I can give you an example of that. About 15 years ago, a scholar and theologian by the name of Dr. Walter Wink dug into that last phrase. Specifically, he used the phrase as it's found elsewhere in the gospel where Jesus says, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And what Dr. Wink did, Dr. Wink, sounds like a character. He looked into the social customs of the day, and he looked at the culture, and he looked at a lot of different things. And for all I know, maybe one day he looked down at his hands, and he suddenly had this realization. And the realization was this: if you strike someone across the right cheek, and you're standing in front of them, you're probably doing it like this. And if that person then turns the other cheek in order for you to slap it, that'd be their left cheek, then you are likely going to slap it like this. And as he thought about this, and he looked into the social customs of the day, he realized that a backhanded slap was the kind of slap delivered by a person to somebody of lower status, a slave or a servant. But to slap somebody with the flat of your hand, he said, that was a slap between equals. And it was only done when somebody was of equal status to you. And so, he deduced, what Jesus was doing was really being this kind of sly revolutionary who was encouraging his people, if they were being abused, to stand up and show their oppressor that they are indeed equal by forcing an admission of equality in the form of being slapped with the flat of the hand. Now there's a couple of things here. First of all, to me, whether you're getting slapped with the left or right cheek, you're still getting slapped. That doesn't sound empowering. But second of all, we kind of look at that explanation and we like it. Because deep down, we're not really comfortable with the idea of a meek Jesus. Because we look at that meekness and we think of it as being powerless. So when Dr. Wink decides that Jesus preaching that you could be slapped as long as you were being slapped as an equal, that gives Jesus then a certain amount of power. And I thought about this week, and I finally decided that seemed pretty unlikely. First of all, when you look at the reading that we had today from Luke, Jesus doesn't differentiate between left and right cheek, and that right there just sort of knocks down the whole argument. But the revolutionary aspect of Jesus isn't that he was encouraging his followers to resist in some devious and sneaky way. Nor was Jesus by not reacting to the slap. Nor was he encouraging us to be powerless. Instead, Jesus was showing us that power, real power, comes from being in control of yourself. Real power is the power that you have over what you do. And that is the only real power that we have in our lives. Because you control whether you are going to act or react with violence. It doesn't have to be dictated by what's done to you. You control whether you are going to resent or embrace a person who's confronting you. You control whether you're going to be angry or whether you're going to refuse to let anger tarnish your soul and cloud your judgment. You control whether you're going to be dismissive of another human being and their point of view, of their choices or of their lifestyle, or whether you're actually going to try to listen and understand. And maybe even in a perfect world, then go ahead and engage in a true dialogue that'll help both of you grow. And that's really the other side of the coin. Because Christian living is not only a matter of resisting hate and anger within ourselves. It's also about promoting acts of love. It's about promoting charity to those who are in need and prayers and blessings to those who are struggling with something in their lives. It's about doing good at every opportunity and exceeding the expectations of others in the good that we do. And Jesus is pretty clear about this. Because essentially he says, don't just love the people who love you. Everybody does that. Sinners do that. I want you to go beyond. I want you to show that my followers are made of better stuff than that. And of course the question then is, can we? Actually, that's wrong. The question is, will we? We have the gift and the blessing that I've talked about other times. The gift and blessing of free will. And I believe that that free will is deeply connected to the Spirit, the pneuma, the New Testament calls it, that God breathed into us in humanity's earliest days. Free will is choice. So with that gift, then, the question is, will we show? Will we make the choice to show that we are made of better stuff? Will we seek out those with whom we disagree and actually have a civil conversation? Will we reach out to those that we struggle, whom we struggle to accept, and embrace them? And say, you know what, I don't understand what you're doing, but I love you anyway. Will we live out Jesus' injunction here in Luke 6:37 to not judge others, not to condemn others, but instead to forgive? That's a pretty tall order. To really stop and think and act that way in everyday life, that's a big deal. It's the order that Jesus has given us. And in a world where anger and hatred have gained such a foothold as they have today, there is just too much at stake to let that go. Thousands of years of human history and the accumulated experience of something like 70 billion people over the course of history have taught us one thing: hate and an unwillingness to forgive and the desire to oppress have never, ever brought forth anything positive in this world. But love can. Jesus can, and Jesus has brought forth something positive. The love of Jesus changed the world, and the love of Jesus changes us. And if we will walk in this way as his disciples, we can change more than we would ever